I died the first time on a Tuesday. Not in combat. I'd survived 3 deployments for that honor. No, I died in my own bathroom, blood pooling around me from wrists I'd opened because I couldn't take one more day of Jake's gaslighting, one more day of watching him spend my disability benefits on her, one more day of the VA telling me my claims were suspicious, that maybe I was committing fraud. I died believing I was the problem. Then I woke up, 5 years earlier, in the hospital bed at Walter Reed, fresh off the transport from Germany, my right leg still screaming phantom pain from the IED that had torn through our convoy. The same nurse was checking my vitals. The same doctor was explaining the surgeries ahead. The same Jake was sitting in the chair by my bed, holding my hand, his eyes full of what I'd mistaken for love. This time I knew better. This time I knew exactly who Jake Morrison was. A predator who'd seen a wounded veteran and smelled opportunity. I knew about Bethany, the friend he was already texting. I knew how he'd propose 6 months from now, how he'd insist on having access to my accounts to help manage everything while you heal, baby. I knew how he'd systematically drain my disability payments, my medical benefits, my housing allowance, all while I struggled with PTSD and chronic pain, all while he convinced me I was imagining things. I knew how it ended, and this time I was going to make sure it ended differently. Sergeant Hayes? The nurse smiled at me. How are you feeling? I looked at Jake. He squeezed my hand, his expression perfectly crafted concern. In my first life, I'd found that look comforting. Now I saw it for what it was, a mask hiding cold calculation. I'm good, I said, squeezing back. Really good, actually. Jake's smile widened. He thought he'd won already. He had no idea the war had just begun. The next 5 months were a masterclass in playing the long game. I did everything exactly as I had the first time, with one critical difference. This time, I was documenting everything. Every time Jake suggested I add him to my bank account for emergencies, every time he asked about my disability rating, my monthly payments, my medical appointments, every time he steered conversations toward my benefits with that practiced, casual interest. So the VA gives you how much for housing? He'd ask over dinner, tone light. Depends on the zip code and my rating, I'd answer, watching him mentally calculate. Why? Just want to make sure you're getting everything you're entitled to, babe. You sacrificed so much. You deserve every penny. What he meant was, I deserve every penny. I started keeping a journal, not just any journal, a detailed log with dates, times, conversations. I saved every text message. I recorded conversations, with my phone strategically placed, when he talked about my benefits. Maryland was a 2-party consent state, but I wasn't planning to use the recordings in criminal court. I just needed them for my own records, for my own sanity, to remember I wasn't crazy this time. I knew the proposal was coming. Same restaurant, Enzo's, the Italian place downtown. Same date, 6 months after I'd come home. I even knew what ring he'd bought, because he'd used my Amazon account to search for best affordable engagement rings in my first life. When he got down on one knee, I said yes. The other patrons applauded. Jake beamed, and I smiled, thinking about federal prison. The wedding was small. My battle buddies from my unit came, Martinez, Thompson, Jackson. Jake had discouraged me from inviting them the first time, said they'd bring up bad memories. I hadn't understood then that he wanted me isolated. This time, I made sure they were front and center. You sure about this guy? Martinez had asked me the night before at what passed for my bachelorette party. Something about him feels off. I'm sure, I said, which was true, just not the way she meant it. Jake's family was there too. His mother, who'd spend the next 3 years making passive-aggressive comments about me being damaged goods. His father, who'd loudly complain about welfare queens at every family dinner, apparently not seeing the irony. His sister Crystal, who'd sneer at my limp, my scars, my nightmares. And Bethany. She was there as Crystal's +1. My best friend from college, Crystal had said, smiling sweetly. I'd objected in my first life, feeling an instinctive dislike I couldn't explain. This time I smiled and said it was fine. Because this time I knew Bethany wasn't just Crystal's friend. She was already fucking my fiancé. They thought they were so careful. Jake's phone angled away when he texted. The work emergency that called him away during our honeymoon planning. The way Bethany's eyes tracked him across the room when she thought no one was watching. I watched everything. 2 weeks after the wedding, Jake brought up the VA benefits again. Baby, I've been thinking, he said, in that tone that meant he'd been planning this for weeks. Your disability payments go into your account, right? What if we consolidated our finances? Just makes things easier. I can handle all the bills, manage everything, and you can focus on your physical therapy. This was it. The moment where in my first life I'd agreed, thinking it made sense. Thinking it was what married couples did. Thinking Jake loved me and wanted to help. That's really sweet, I said, putting down my coffee. But I'm not sure the VA would allow that. There are rules about who can access veteran benefits. His expression flickered. Just for a second, frustration broke through the mask. What do you mean, rules? VA disability payments are meant for the veteran. They're not marital property in the traditional sense. I'd done my research this time, spent hours on the VA website, made phone calls, talked to a benefits counselor. There are strict regulations about fraudulent use. I'm not talking about fraudulent use. I'm your husband. I know, babe. I'm just saying we should be careful. Maybe I can add you as a joint account holder? For transparency? He brightened immediately. That would be perfect. I knew it would be. Because a joint account meant Jake would have direct access to my benefits. It meant every dollar he took would be documented, traceable, undeniable. It meant I was handing him the rope to hang himself. The first withdrawal was small, $300 marked as grocery shopping. Except I'd gone grocery shopping that day, I had the receipt, and I watched Jake take that $300 and meet Bethany at a hotel in Silver Spring. I documented it, photos of the receipt, screenshots of the bank transaction, a discrete photo of Jake's car in the hotel parking lot, time-stamped. The withdrawals got bigger, $500 for car repairs. I checked with our mechanic. Jake hadn't brought the car in. $800 for medical bills. None of my medical bills had been paid. The VA covered most of my health care anyway. $1,000 for emergency home repairs. Our landlord confirmed no repairs had been done. Every dollar Jake took from my VA disability payments, he spent on Bethany. Dinners at expensive restaurants, weekend getaways, a diamond bracelet I found the receipt for hidden in his gym bag. He was living a whole separate life with her, funded by my service, my sacrifice, my broken body. In my first life, I hadn't noticed. I'd been so deep in PTSD, so isolated, so focused on managing my pain and my nightmares that I'd missed the signs. When I'd finally discovered the truth, finding texts on his phone, seeing the credit card statements, he'd convinced me I was paranoid, crazy, that the pain medication was making me irrational. He'd actually suggested I was the one misusing my benefits, that maybe I was spending the money and forgetting, that I should report myself to the VA before they investigated me for fraud. And in my desperation to believe him, in my confusion and isolation, I'd almost done it. This time, I was documenting everything, and this time I had a plan. 6 months into our marriage, I called the VA Office of Inspector General. I'd like to report potential benefits fraud, I told the investigator who answered. There was a pause. Are you reporting fraud against yourself or someone else? Both, I said. My husband has access to my VA disability payments. I believe he may be using them inappropriately. I want to cooperate fully with any investigation. I was transferred 3 times before I reached Special Agent David Park, a VA OIG investigator who specialized in benefits fraud cases. Mrs. Morrison, he said, his voice careful. Walk me through what's happening. I told him everything. How Jake had pushed for account access. How he'd been systematically withdrawing my disability payments. How I had documentation of where that money was actually going, not to our household expenses, but to fund an extramarital affair. That's definitely concerning, Park said. But I need to be clear about something. When you gave your husband access to your account, you technically authorized those withdrawals. The fraud angle would depend on whether he misrepresented how he'd use the funds. He told me he'd use them for our household expenses, for my medical bills. Instead, he's spending them on his girlfriend. Do you have documentation of those conversations? Yes, I'd learned from my mistakes. Texts, emails, recorded conversations where he specifically said the money would go to my care and our bills. Park was quiet for a moment. How long has this been going on? 6 months. That's that's over $20,000 in VA disability payments. His voice had sharpened. Mrs. Morrison, if you're willing to cooperate, we can open a formal investigation. But I need you to understand, this could get complicated. Your husband will likely claim you knew and approved of the spending. That's fine, I said, because I have evidence showing otherwise. And Agent Park, there's more. More? He's been filing false claims using my medical information, saying treatments were more expensive than they were, billing the VA for medical equipment I never received. He's been escalating. That last part wasn't true yet, not in this timeline, but I knew it would be. In my first life, Jake had gotten bolder, filing fake claims, forging my signature on benefit forms. That's what had eventually triggered the VA investigation that had destroyed my credibility. This time, I was going to help him along. If you have evidence of false claims, that's a separate federal offense, Park said. Mrs. Morrison, I'm going to be direct with you. What you're describing could result in serious criminal charges. Are you prepared for that? Yes, I said, I'm prepared. Because I'd already lived through the worst, I'd already lost everything. This time, Jake was going to be the one who lost. The investigation took 3 months. 3 months of wearing a wire during conversations with Jake. 3 months of Park and his team reviewing bank statements, medical records, benefit claims. 3 months of me playing the loving wife while documenting every fraudulent transaction. Jake thought he was getting away with it. He got bolder, more careless. Started taking larger amounts. $1,500 for a new laptop that never materialized. $2,000 for security deposit on a better apartment. But we never moved. I pretended not to notice. I played the wounded veteran struggling with PTSD, too foggy from pain medication to track our finances. I gave Jake exactly the cover story he needed. Meanwhile, I worked with Park to build an airtight case. The breakthrough came when Jake filed a false claim for medical equipment. He'd found a form online, forged my signature, claimed I needed a specialized wheelchair costing $8,000, sent it directly to the VA. I'd never requested a wheelchair. I didn't need one. My prosthetic leg worked fine for daily mobility. But Jake didn't know I'd already flagged my account with the VA. He didn't know every form submitted in my name was automatically forwarded to Park's investigation. When the approval came through and the money hit our account, Jake immediately transferred it to a separate account, one I wasn't supposed to know about, the one he shared with Bethany. Park called me the next day, boss. We've got him, he said. The forged signature alone is enough. But combined with the documented misuse of your disability payments, the false claims, the pattern of fraud. Mrs. Morrison, we're looking at multiple felony counts. How long? I asked. Federal sentencing guidelines for this kind of fraud? With the amounts involved, he's looking at 5 to 10 years minimum. 5 to 10 years. In my first life, I'd gotten none. I'd been the one investigated, my benefits suspended, my credibility destroyed. I'd died believing I was the criminal. This time, justice would actually be served. They arrested Jake on a Thursday morning. I was in my physical therapy appointment when it happened. Agent Park had suggested I be elsewhere, said it would be easier. But I'd asked them to wait until I got home. I wanted to see his face. Jake was at his computer when I walked in, probably texting Bethany. He looked up, smiling. Hey, babe. How was PT? Good, I said, setting down my bag. The knock on the door came 30 seconds later. Jake frowned. Were you expecting someone? Yeah, I said. I was. He opened the door to find Agent Park and 2 other federal investigators, all holding badges. Jacob Morrison? Park said. Yes. I'm Special Agent Park with the VA Office of Inspector General. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of benefits fraud, identity theft, and making false statements to a federal agency. The color drained from Jake's face. What? There must be some mistake. No mistake. You have the right to remain silent. Kara! Jake spun to face me, his expression desperate. Tell them this is insane. I looked at him, really looked at him, saw the panic, the calculation already working behind his eyes as he tried to figure out how to manipulate his way out of this. I can't do that, Jake, I said quietly. Because it's not insane. It's the truth. His expression shifted then, cycling through shock, rage, fear. You set me up. No, I said, I just documented your crimes. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, Park continued, cuffing Jake's wrists behind his back. You have the right to an attorney? This is bullshit, Jake shouted. She gave me access to that account. She authorized it. Mr. Morrison, I strongly suggest you stop talking until you have legal representation, Park said calmly. But Jake wasn't listening. He was staring at me, and I saw the moment it all clicked. The moment he realized this wasn't a mistake or a misunderstanding. That I'd been planning this. That I'd known all along. You fucking bitch, he hissed. You knew. This whole time, you knew. Yeah, I said. I knew. They let him out in handcuffs. Our neighbors watched from their doorways, whispering. Jake's mother would call within the hour, screaming at me. His father would threaten to sue me. Crystal would post on Facebook about what a psycho I was. I didn't care. I stood in the doorway and watched them load Jake into the federal vehicle. Watched them drive away. Felt the weight I'd been carrying for 5 years, for a whole lifetime, finally lift from my shoulders. Agent Park stayed behind. You okay, Ms. Morrison? I'm perfect, I said. And meant it. The next week, they arrested Bethany. Turns out she wasn't just Jake's girlfriend. She'd been actively helping him commit the fraud. The separate bank account was in her name. She'd helped forge my signature on claims. She'd even posed as me on phone calls to the VA, claiming medical expenses that didn't exist. That was news to me. I'd only known about the affair in my first life, not the extent of her involvement. But the investigation had uncovered everything. Bethany tried to claim she didn't know the money was from VA benefits, that Jake had told her it was from his job, that she was innocent, but the paper trail told a different story. Emails between her and Jake, explicitly discussing my disability rating and how much they could safely take each month. Text messages about which fake medical claims would be hardest to verify. Screenshots of my VA account, which meant she'd had my login information. They charged her as an accomplice. Same felonies Jake was facing. When Crystal called me sobbing, begging me to tell the investigators that Bethany was innocent, I almost laughed. She's not innocent, Crystal, I said. She helped your brother steal from a disabled veteran. She helped him forge the federal documents. She's guilty as hell. But she didn't know. She knew. The evidence is pretty clear. How can you be so cold? Crystal sobbed. Don't you have any compassion? I thought about my first life. About dying alone on a bathroom floor because Jake and Bethany had stolen my benefits, my dignity, my will to live. About the nightmares where I could still feel the blood leaving my body, the cold tile against my skin. No, I said, I really don't. I hung up. The trial took 8 months to get to court. Jake's lawyer tried everything. Claimed I'd authorized the spending. Claimed I was mentally unstable from PTSD and couldn't be trusted. Claimed this was a vindictive wife trying to punish her husband for having an affair. The prosecutor demolished every argument. She presented the bank records showing systematic withdrawals that never went to household expenses. She presented the forged signatures on VA forms. She presented Jake's separate bank account with Bethany, funded entirely by my disability payments. She presented my testimony, calm, clear, documented, showing exactly how I'd been manipulated and defrauded. Mr. Morrison didn't just betray his wife's trust, the prosecutor said in her closing argument. He stole from the United States government. He exploited a system designed to help wounded veterans. He forged federal documents, and he showed absolutely no remorse. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Jake's sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom in the front row and watched as the judge reviewed his case. "Mr. Morrison," the judge said, looking at Jake over her glasses, "you were entrusted with access to your wife's VA disability benefits. These benefits exist because Sergeant Hayes sacrificed her physical health in service to this country. She came home with a traumatic amputation, chronic pain, and PTSD. And you saw that as an opportunity." Jake's lawyer tried to interject, but the judge held up a hand. "You systematically stole over $35,000 in VA disability payments. You forged your wife's signature on multiple federal forms. You filed false claims for medical equipment that was never needed or received. You did all of this while having an extramarital affair, spending your wife's benefits on your mistress while your wife struggled with her recovery." The judge paused. "I've been on this bench for 20 years. I have never seen such a calculated, callous exploitation of a veteran." Jake was crying now. "Your Honor, please, save it, Mr. Morrison. The federal sentencing guidelines call for 60 to 78 months for fraud of this monetary value. However, given the aggravating factors, the vulnerability of the victim, the abuse of trust, the involvement of federal benefits designed for disabled veterans, I'm sentencing you to the maximum, 10 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You will also pay full restitution to the VA and to your wife. 10 years. I watched Jake's face crumble, watched him turn to look at me, his expression full of hatred and disbelief. I smiled. Bethany got 7 years. Her sentencing hearing was shorter. She tried to claim she was just in love, that Jake had manipulated her too. The judge wasn't buying it. "You had multiple opportunities to stop participating in this fraud," the judge told her. "You chose to continue. You posed as Mrs. Morrison on phone calls to federal agencies. You forged her signature. You were an active, willing participant in a scheme to defraud the government and exploit a disabled veteran." 7 years. When they let her out, she was sobbing. "This isn't fair. I didn't know it was illegal." I waited until she passed my seat. Then I leaned forward slightly, just enough for her to hear me whisper, "You did know, and now you get to live with it." The divorce was finalized while Jake was in federal prison. His lawyer tried to argue he deserved half of my VA disability back payments. The judge actually laughed. "Mr. Morrison is currently incarcerated for stealing those exact benefits," she said. "He's lucky Ms. Morrison isn't countersuing for emotional damages. Divorce granted, no assets to Mr. Morrison." I walked out of that courtroom a free woman. Free from Jake. Free from his family. Free from the gaslighting, the manipulation, the years of being told I was crazy when I knew something was wrong. Free from the bathroom floor where I'd died in another life. A year later, I was sitting in my new apartment, a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, paid for by my VA housing allowance that now went entirely to me, when Martinez called. "You watching the news?" she asked. "No, why?" "Turn on Channel 7. I flipped on the TV. There was a news segment about VA fraud, featuring Agent Park talking about a recent string of arrests. "And we want veterans to know that this kind of exploitation is taken very seriously," Park was saying. "If you suspect someone is misusing your benefits, report it. We will investigate and we will prosecute." The segment showed Jake's mugshot, showed Bethany's, showed the courthouse where they'd been sentenced. "That's you, isn't it?" Martinez asked. "Your ex-husband?" "Yeah," I said, "that's it. That's him." "Good," Martinez said fiercely. "Fucking good. He deserved worse." Maybe he did, but 10 years in federal prison felt pretty good to me. I thought about my first life sometimes, about the Kara who'd believed Jake loved her, who'd trusted him with her benefits, her health, her life, who'd died thinking she was the problem. I wished I could go back and tell her, "You're not crazy. You're not the problem. You're a survivor and you deserve so much better." But I couldn't. All I could do was live the life she didn't get to have. I finished my physical therapy, got properly treated for my PTSD, started using my benefits the way they were intended, for me, for my health, for my recovery. I got a job at a veterans advocacy nonprofit, helping other vets navigate their benefits. I became a resource for veterans dealing with fraud or exploitation. I testified before Congress about the need for better protections for disabled veterans. I lived, and every time I saw a news story about VA fraud, every time I helped another veteran recognize the warning signs of financial abuse, I thought about Jake in his cell. I thought about Bethany in hers, and I smiled. 5 years after Jake's arrest, I got a letter from him. I almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. Kara, I've had a lot of time to think in here. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I fucked up. But I need you to understand, I never meant to hurt you. I was in a bad place, made bad decisions. Bethany and it wasn't about you. You were dealing with so much, and I felt alone, and it just happened. I know I can't take back what I did, but I'm asking you to consider writing a letter to the parole board when my hearing comes up in 3 years. You could help me get out early. We could both move on with our lives. I've changed. I'm not that person anymore. I've found God in here, and I understand now how wrong I was. I want to make amends. Please, for what we once had, help me. Jake, I read it twice. Then I wrote back, Jake, no, you didn't fuck up. You committed federal crimes. You systematically stole from a disabled veteran, your wife, to fund your affair. You forged my signature on federal documents. You gaslit me, isolated me, and exploited my service-related injuries for your own benefit. You did mean to hurt me. Every withdrawal was intentional. Every forged signature was calculated. Every lie was designed to keep me confused and compliant. You didn't find yourself in a bad place. You saw an opportunity to exploit someone vulnerable and you took it. As for the parole board, I will absolutely be writing them a letter. It will detail every single crime you committed. It will explain exactly how you exploited a disabled veteran. It will recommend they deny your early release. You asked for what we once had. We never had anything real. You saw a wounded soldier and saw dollar signs. That was our entire relationship. Serve your time, all of it. Kara P.S. I heard Bethany's been writing you. Just so you know, she sent similar letters to her parole board, throwing you under the bus and claiming you forced her to participate. So much for true love. I mailed it that afternoon. I never heard from him again. 10 years after Jake's arrest, the day he was released from federal prison, I was in Atlanta for a veterans conference. I was a keynote speaker now. Protecting veteran benefits, recognizing and preventing financial exploitation. I told my story to rooms full of veterans, advocates, VA employees. Told them about the warning signs, about how to document suspicious activity, about how the VA OIG was there to help, not to punish victims. I'd helped change policy. New protections for disabled veterans, better oversight of benefit usage, mandatory education about financial fraud during VA benefit appointments. I'd turned my trauma into something useful. After my speech, a young veteran approached me. She was maybe 25, missing her left arm below the elbow. Ms. Hayes, she said quietly. Can I talk to you? Of course. My boyfriend, he's been asking about my disability payments, wanting me to add him to my account. And something feels wrong, but he says I'm being paranoid, that if I loved him, I'd trust him, and She was crying now. I don't know what to do. I put my hand on her shoulder. You're not paranoid. Your instincts are right. And I'm going to help you. I gave her my card, connected her with Agent Park, who'd become a friend over the years, helped her set up protections for her benefits, watched as she broke free from the man who'd been planning to exploit her. That night, I got a text from Park. Your ex got released today, thought you should know. I know, I texted back. And I'm 3 states away living my best life. He can't touch me. Because that was the truth. Jake had taken 10 years of his life in prison. But I'd taken those same 10 years and built something real. A career, a purpose, relationships with people who valued me for more than my bank account. I'd survived him twice. Once by dying, once by fighting back. And I'd won. I never remarried. Didn't really want to. I dated sometimes. Found people who respected me, who understood what I'd been through, who never once asked about my VA benefits. I bought a house with my VA loan, a small place with a garden where I grew tomatoes and basil. I adopted a dog, a 3-legged rescue named Sergeant, who understood what it was like to adapt to a new normal. I kept working with veterans, kept telling my story, kept fighting to protect others from what had happened to me. Sometimes I still thought about my first life. about dying on that bathroom floor, about the despair that had driven me to it. But mostly, I thought about Agent Park's words when he'd first called to tell me they were arresting Jake. Mrs. Morrison, you did the right thing. You potentially saved dozens of other veterans from similar exploitation. You should be proud. I was proud. I'd taken the worst thing that ever happened to me and turned it into purpose. I'd taken my death and turned it into life. And somewhere out there, Jake Morrison was living in a halfway house, trying to rebuild a life with a federal fraud conviction on his record. Every job application rejected. Every background check failed. Every day a reminder of what he'd lost. Every day a reminder of what he'd done. Justice, I'd learned, wasn't always immediate. But sometimes, if you were patient and smart and willing to play the long game, it came. And when it did, it was sweet. I was watering my tomatoes when Martinez called again. Did you see? She asked. See what? Jake's trying to get his conviction overturned. Says he was entrapped, that you manipulated him into committing fraud. I laughed. Actually laughed. Good luck with that. The evidence was pretty clear. That's what I said. Fucking delusional. Let him try, I said, watching Sergeant chase a butterfly through the garden. He's got nothing but time. And I had everything. A life I'd fought for, a purpose I'd earned, a second chance I'd made count. I'd died once, believing I was worthless. I'd lived twice, proving I was anything but. And Jake Morrison, in the end, was just a footnote in my story. A cautionary tale. A warning to anyone who thought they could exploit a veteran and get away with it. Because we might be wounded, but we're not weak. We might be struggling, but we're not stupid. And we remember. God, do we remember? I finished watering the garden, went inside, looked at the framed photo on my wall, me and my unit, all of us young and whole before the IED, before Walter Reed, before Jake, before I learned what I was really capable of. Here's to you, I whispered to that younger version of myself. You survived worse than Jake Morrison. You survived war. And then I did what I did every day. I lived well, because that in the end was the best revenge of all.